Hey, so morning. Nice to see you all. Happy Saturday again. Really happy to have a chance to be back with you guys, and thank you again so much for your interest in these programs. It's a gift to me that you're interested and that I have an opportunity to share things that have been very meaningful to me over a long period of time. So. I'd mentioned multiple times that I'm following a structure that I took from this program that Google had run, this Search Inside Yourself program, and moving on to the final section of these 6 parts, which is the topic of leadership. And so getting into this topic of leadership and in particular leading based on the increased empathy, the increased mindfulness and so forth that we've built. We'll look at that. But so what I wanted us to do is to guide a meditation to begin with that is similar to a meditation it's the same meditation that I guided on Tuesday in last Tuesday's class, which is to bring to mind someone who we feel has been kind to us in some way, but then to focus on the internal experience, the feeling inside our body that arouses, that brings in us. So we all like spending time with people who are kind to us. We all wish the whole world was kind to us. But there's actually a little bit more to the story, which is that there's a special feeling that we get when we feel that others have been kind to us, or when we reinterpret a situation to feel fortunate instead of unfortunate. There's a special feeling. And it's important for us to become aware of what that feeling is and how we feel internally so that we can just understand more about ourselves and what motivates us and how we can act. So how we act. So we can just start as usual by finding a comfortable position for a meditation. If it helps to stretch our shoulders or neck a bit, and we take a deep breath in and out, and just stretching from the inside. Then we take another deep breath in and out and just allow ourselves to relax. We just kind of invite ourselves to relax. And then we can take a third breath and ask ourselves, what is important right now? We can begin by becoming aware of our own body, just how our body is feeling. Whatever that is, however we feel. Tired, energized, happy, unhappy. Just becoming aware. And we can bring to mind someone who's been kind to us in our life, who we feel has benefited us or has a good intention towards us. And just focus on that experience of a person who's been kind to us for a little bit. And then we can, with part of our mind, we can just check inside. When we think about this person, how do we feel inside? What is the feeling that we get when we recall or think about this person? Where in our body do we feel something different when we think about this person? How does this change our feelings? And then we can just contemplate, what is our intention for our time today? How do we want to see the direction of our life shift a little bit through this brief time today? Just hold this intention in mind as we arise from our meditation. All right, so I'd mentioned that this system that I was following, it has these 6 stages. So just to sort of summarize or remind about these, from building mindfulness, self-awareness, self-management, motivation, we've spent a while looking at empathy, and now looking at leadership, that topic of leadership. So um, here. Okay, so these first four sections, they deal principally with others. And so I'm just trying to, I lost the video here. Okay, sorry, you can see that again. Great. So these first four sections, they deal principally with ourself, just getting a better awareness of what's going on inside of ourself. So mindfulness just is becoming aware of what's happening inside us without judgment. Self-awareness includes looking at how we build a self on the basis of what's going on inside. So mindfulness is becoming aware of all of the, our body, the moving parts in our mind and emotions and so forth. Self-awareness is understanding a bit better how we build a self around that. Self-management is about guiding our actions, learning to act or respond with wisdom as opposed to react. And motivation is learning how to cultivate a strength, an internal strength and determination to pursue our, whatever are the goals that we have set for ourselves and so forth. But then these last two stages, they focus more on others. So the first, empathy, is just building that emotional bridge to others, building a bridge to others' experience, others' internal experience, and helping to overcome this natural sense of isolation that we have and natural sense of separation between ourselves and others. Now, leadership gets into the topic of how to have a beneficial effect on the people around us. And that's simply it. Leadership just means influence. So leadership doesn't necessarily mean that you have authority, that you're in a position of authority or power, but it means that you have influence on a psychological level. And so there are three aspects to leadership. And the first is acting with compassion. And this deals with the motivation with which we're approaching leadership. The second is perceiving the situation, perceiving ourselves, others, and so forth with wisdom. And then the third aspect is refining our skill in this whole activity. So you can have a compassionate motivation, you can have a wise view, but you can be clumsy in your way of approaching leadership. So we need to also refine our skill in leadership. So compassion, first of all, is essential because it's the motivation that needs to drive benevolent leadership. So leadership is not always benevolent, unfortunately. But benevolent leadership is always compassionate. Benevolent just means you have a goodwill, you have a good intention. What's that mean, good intention? It means good intention towards the people around you. What's that mean, having a good intention towards the people around you? Means that your wish is aligned with their wish. Now, what do other people want? Infinitely varied, right? Infinite variation in what other people want. And sometimes people's wishes are counterproductive. Sometimes people's wishes are foolish or short-sighted. Sometimes people's wishes are negative and destructive. And but it's really, 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 really important for us to just think that all of those wishes are superficial wishes, right? And you think about how our wish changes, from morning till night on one given day. Our wish changes from wishing to wake up and, go to the bathroom or eat something, to take a walk, to read, to study, to relax, to talk, our wishes, our superficial wishes vary all the time. And sometimes we have negative wishes, right? We get angry and we wish to, somebody would just go away, or we want to harm them or something like that. But our wishes change so much, and they've changed so much throughout our whole life. But there is a constant, there's an underlying constant to our wish, which is that we all wish to be happy and to be free from suffering and pain. And that means that our wishes are 100% tied to our feeling state, either our immediate feeling state or our expectation of our future feeling state. So if you're somebody who's kind of disciplined and, future oriented, you're focused on your future happiness and becoming free from future pain. And I sometimes think about the difference between Northern Europeans and Southern Europeans, and this, Southern Europeans may be a bit more relaxed and casual, and Northern Europeans a bit more like disciplined and so forth. And I always attribute that to thinking winter is coming, right? If you're somewhere like in England or, Scandinavia or something like that, winter is coming. You've got a limited number of non-frozen months. You need houses that are well built, well sealed. You need to make sure you've got a place to store food. You've got to be very, very disciplined just to survive the winter, right? If you're in a more moderate climate like San Diego here, Southern California, it leads to, Southern Europe, it leads to a bit more of relaxed, oh, it'll be fine. There's going to be food, right? Even in the middle of the winter, you could find some food someplace. And so perhaps you can think about how people get either oriented more towards future happiness and preventing future suffering, or just present happiness and preventing present suffering. But one way or another, we're all interested in the feeling state, that experience of being free from problems and pain and suffering and loss and danger, and having happiness, contentment, joy, relaxation, all of these good things, but they're all feeling states. So it's really important to distinguish between the feeling and the wish, right? The feeling state is just an experience. Or an imagined future experience, or a fear of a future experience. But the wish, that is an intention, that's a motivation, it drives us, right? But the wish always comes from the feeling. So if you have a tiny feeling of pain, you recoil immediately. Insects do that. They recoil from something that's scary. If you put your finger down in front of an ant, they'll turn around and move the other direction out of fear, right? Animals do that. Our intentions, our wishes, they always respond to the feeling state. So feelings drive our wishes and intentions. And that core wish is exactly the same for everybody. Human, animal, young, old, from here, from there, doesn't matter. We all have that core wish to be happy and to be free from suffering. And then all of our other wishes are just like branches that branch out of that. It's like it's the trunk of the tree, so to speak, of our wishes is this wish to be happy and free from suffering. And then all of these specific wishes, I want to get a degree in this, or I want to, buy this thing, they're all branch wishes that come out of that. So if you want to have compassion, you need to go to the root, right? You need to go to your own root. What's my own root wish? What's other people's root wish? You go to the root and you connect at the root level with others' wish to be free from suffering and happy. And then you can connect with anybody, right? And everybody. And even the people who are different political party from you, or different, personality style from you, and, even your competitors, or, whoever they are, you can connect with them with compassion. So this compassion is a wish for others to be happy and free. So basically, it is extending our own wish to be happy and free, or recognizing that commonality, but it's coming from empathy, but it's also coming from wisdom. So when I say it's coming from wisdom, what kind of wisdom? What wisdom am I talking about? Partly it's that wisdom that I just described, right? That wisdom that knows that we all have the same root wish. We all have the same root motivation. That's a kind of wisdom, for example. And that, helping somebody to fulfill a self-destructive wish, or a foolish wish, or a harmful wish that harms others and so forth, that's not real compassion. That's not a wise compassion. So we don't want foolish or unwise compassion. And I mentioned that compassion comes from empathy. This is a concept that came from the Search Inside Yourself program. The difference between two feeling states that can both come out of empathy. One is this empathic distress, and the other is compassion. So, empathic distress. So, you may hear terms like compassion fatigue. Um, you may think about people who experience burnout, like in medical professions or caring professions. Hopefully, all professions could be caring professions, but um, some people are really exposed to very, very, very painful, difficult situations. My brother's girlfriend, she is a social worker counseling children who've been principally counseling children who've been sexually abused, right? Incredibly emotionally challenging job, right? Incredibly emotionally challenging job. So very, very hard to navigate that um, while keeping a mind that's undisturbed. Very easy to slip into burnout, and this is a major issue in social work and for lots of caring professions. You know, for medical workers, obviously dealing with COVID these days. So I'm not saying it's easy to navigate and sustain compassion, right? But I am saying that there's some guidance and some wisdom we can get on how to navigate this wisely and skillfully while still protecting our own internal peace of mind and our own internal ability to continue to be compassionate and empathetic. Because that's the danger, right? The danger with burnout is it short circuits your ability to help long term. So if you really want to help long term, you have to figure out how to avoid burnout. To sustain your good intention over a long period of time. So empathic distress is the idea that you see something and it's just so disturbing that you can't bear it, right? But look at the contrast between these. So first of all, empathic distress is self-related emotion, carries with it negative feelings of stress, leads to withdrawal and non-social behavior, and leads to poor health and burnout. So when and we all have some of this experience, you know, for example, looking at the news, right? The news generally is very distressing, right? And you can be a sensitive person concerned about the fate of the world, right? And you can look at the news and you can get yourself into a deep state of distress. Now, there's a lot going on, but you can also get yourself into a state of compassion. So compassion is an other related emotion. It's focused on what others are experiencing, what others need. It leads to positive feelings of kindness. It leads, instead of to withdrawal, it leads to approach and pro-social motivations and then good health. Now, again, not saying it's easy always to navigate this. So let's say you see a news article, right, that really, you know, well, most, like many news articles are disturbing in some way. They're meant to sort of generate a reaction or response. It's easy for us also to feel powerless, and when we feel powerless, by definition, that's a self-related feeling, right? Like, oh, I should be able to do something to help with this, but I can't because I'm powerless, and I, you know, really want to help, but I can't. And so it's all pointing back in to ourself, or it's easy for it to point back into ourself. It's easy for us to get negative feelings of, you know, the world is hostile, right? The world is filled with crazy people or negative people. And so then in the sense, there's a withdrawal. And if you think about, you know, this political polarization that we've had in the US, especially, right? I don't know if you guys have seen these curves where, you know, in the 60s and 70s, there were the sort of liberal folks and the conservative folks, but there's a lot of overlap sort of between moderate, you know, people have somewhat moderate views, but over the last few decades, they've sort of shifted, they sort of pushed away. So people who, you know, aligned with liberal causes tend to be totally and very strongly aligned with them. Those aligned with conservative causes, totally, very strongly aligned with those, and very few people in this moderate sort of middle ground. So in a sense, that's pulling away, these two groups pulling away from each other, withdrawing from each other because of feeling some, um, feeling some hostility towards each other, probably like feeling that the other is the cause of all of the negative news we see and all of the pain and the problems and so forth. And it's tricky there because it can feel like we're surrounded by enemies. And one of the things that really aligns people, one of the things that really gets people to act together coherently is having enemies. Is one of the most powerful things you can do to get people to all band together and act together, is having a common enemy. So if you've got a common enemy, then you can galvanize the people, right? But if that enemy, I mean, but that's always the way with defining an enemy. Some places it's always a bit short-sighted, right? You think about all these, World War I, World War II. You got all these 20-year-olds, typically young men, right? 20-year-old young men, all doing the bidding of old men generally. And they have families back home, um, and they're all humans, they're all scared. And then you pit these armies against each other, right? But fundamentally, they're basically the same kinds of people, right? There's this demonizing that happens. If you look at the war posters in World War II, they depict, Germans like the US and England, they depict Germans like green skin and horns. My wife, when she was young in South Korea growing up, they had video games. You know how we have whack-a-mole in the video arcades? They had whack a North Korean. And so they have these North Koreans pop up and you'd have to whack them with a hammer. Whack, 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 whack. And they would have horns, literally horns and green skin, but it was clear that they were North Koreans because they had, kind of a Mao style hat on and so forth. So she grew up in this culture that was sort of systematically demonizing. That was the enemy. That was the enemy. And so you rally the people together and you dehumanize this other group, but it's actually very stressful, right? And so there's a sense in which the world always withdraws, the world always sort of clumps together and divides people naturally. But on a macro scale, we get divided, nationally, we get divided by religion, we get divided by political orientation, we get divided by whatever, But even on an individual level, as individuals, we get divided from the people around us, and that feeling of isolation that we have is can deepen with this empathic distress that I showed, right? Like you can have this reaction to seeing the suffering of others and so forth that actually creates a heaviness or a depression or poor health and so forth, and enhances that sense of isolation from others, as opposed to compassion, which by its very definition, compassion is getting closer to others because it's coming from empathy. You're actually connecting emotionally with the experience of others, and you're aligning your wish with the wishes of others to be happy, but it doesn't imply anything about having the power to solve their problems. And I think that's where a lot of our distress comes, because we feel like we should be able to solve these problems. So I watched a documentary last night with Ashley, my wife, about Ram Dass, this documentary called Becoming Nobody. And he was an influencer in my father's generation through the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, but not somebody I knew very much about. But he described his experience of just being with people as they're dying, and how he loved nothing more than being with people when they're dying, because it's such a big transition. And I think being with people while they're dying is such an amazing example of a situation where we have no power to stop that. And we want to have power, right? But there's a sense in which at some point, someone is actually going to die. Everybody's dying, right? Everyone's going to die. You can delay it, you can defer it, but you can't prevent that from happening. So everybody dies. It's the final transition, right? We have all these transitions in life, birth and puberty and, getting married and having children and all these big transitions in their life. But the final transition is death, right? Where you transition to from being somebody to not being somebody. And that person that you were just transitions to disappearing, right? That person that you are and were just disappears. It's final transition. So you can't do anything about it. Utter powerlessness. But even in that state of complete powerlessness, you can still have compassion. And that's the interesting thing about compassion, is it doesn't necessarily imply that you can fix a situation. But what it implies is that you are connected to that other person and what they want. And you can be connected with other people who are in experiences of pain and so forth, but you can still be peaceful. And if, sometime early in the course, I had this big slide that just said, "Don't panic." Right? This is guidance from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic. So it's a great rule to try to live by. Like, whatever happens, don't panic. So if you connect with somebody else and they're afraid, you connect with somebody else and they're in pain and so forth, you can connect with them, you can be with them, you can be compassionate and connected to their feeling state, but don't panic. And you can just be there and kind of be aware of that experience. Of course, if you can help them, then help them. But in most cases, at some point when people are dying, for example, there's nothing you can do. And each of us individually have an incredibly limited power. Right? Incredibly limited power. We have all these fantasies about, like, if I was the president, I would do this, this, and this. I've had those fantasies since I was a little kid, right? If I ruled the world, I'd, implement the metric system everywhere. And so we have all these fantasies, but we don't really have much power. We have so little power, and that's very distressing, in a sense, to our sense of self. But that's just all about us, right? We have this fantasy, like we should be superheroes, or, but it's ridiculous, right? These ridiculous fantasies. And in place of those fantasies, though, we can have an actual internal experience of compassion, this emotional alignment with others. And the reason why I'm discussing compassion in the context of leadership, is because, this expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Like, people will only be influenced by you if they have some sense that you actually have their best interests in mind. And having somebody else's best interest in mind, that's compassion, that's love, right? It's just, what do they want? They want to be happy. You want the same thing, right? And even in a business context, we don't use the word love, right? But we, what are the words we use in business? Like, figure out the customer's pain points, and then have a wish to provide a solution to customers' pain points. That's just love in another word, right? It's just like, where are they suffering? How can we help? It's triggering this emotional relationship towards others, right? And so leadership is a very, very, very emotional thing. We follow people, and leadership means influence. To what degree do we have influence influence on others? Leadership doesn't imply control. At least in the modern world, people have too many options, too much freedom, right? Some situations, leadership can be like control and just tell people what to do. But in the modern world, people have a lot of options. So leadership is much more about influence. But we're influenced on a very emotional level. Like, we're primates, right? We look for the leader in our pack, in our tribe, and we want to internalize somebody who has our best interest in mind. And so if you want to be a leader, if you want to be influencing others, it comes from compassion. It comes from a wish to solve others' problems, having that good wish for them. Even if you don't have the power to help directly, you can sustain the wish. And there's an old teacher, Nagarjuna, he said, even if you don't have any ability to help right now, if you simply sustain the wish, eventually you'll have some ability. But normally where we fall down is we find it difficult to sustain the wish, because we get into this empathic distress instead of compassion. It's just too hard to sustain a good motivation, like a broad good motivation, because we feel like we should be able to, that we should because we're kind of reactive. We feel like we have to do something about it, do something about it. But there's and that's why mindfulness is at the root of this ability to just observe, right? To just observe something without always feeling like we have to act. Um, and so whether we're observing something inside ourselves without feeling we have to act externally, or whether we're observing a difficult situation that others are facing without having to act, it's important because it allows us to build and sustain and increase and build this habit of compassion for others. And that wish is really that wish is what we need to stabilize. Just that good motivation, and then see how it manifests. I guess one final analogy, just in the spirit of nerdiness, so if you've got a charged sphere, some charged metal sphere and so forth, if something comes close to it, you can might send out a little shock, a little bit of static electricity because it's charged, right? So, but when there's nothing close to it, it's just charged. It's just got a lot of potential. So our compassion is like that. It's like building that potential to help. It doesn't imply that we're actively helping all the time, but when a situation arises, we will help. If something comes close to us and hits our motive, and we have the ability to help, we have the motivation to help, then that's where these sort of sparks will arise. But we need to focus on building that potential, that motivation, that internal wish to help, more than thinking that we have to immediately act, because otherwise it's like you're not actually building up much potential. It's like something with a very weak charge that's always discharging all the time and has very limited ability. You're not actually building up a charge because it's, sorry, I don't know if that was too nerdy, but basically we want to build this big charge. So, okay. So why don't we take a few minutes here, just in conclusion, to allow this to settle in a bit, with some meditation, just some final meditation. So again, we find a comfortable position for our body, and again, just taking a deep breath. And this deep breath, just stretching and resetting our physical body, which helps to reset our emotional states and helps us to relax. Our wish for ourself to be happy and free from suffering and pain is constant and stable. It never goes away. There's incredible potential. It's always manifesting. But our wish for others to be happy and free from suffering may be weaker, more sporadic, more limited to a small number of people. And often we may feel very isolated. It really causes us to struggle emotionally. So compassion just means extending our wish to be happy and free from suffering to others, to the people around us, friends, strangers, eventually even enemies. Just recognizing we all have the same root wish. So we can bring to mind someone, perhaps the same person we felt was kind to us earlier, bring to mind somebody, and we just wish them well. And just think, may they be well. May they be free from problems and suffering. And if we can, just try to extend this feeling to the people around us in our family, people we live near, our neighbors, or people we work with. May they be well, may they be free from problems. Everyone has problems. Rich, poor, young, old, smart, less intelligent. Everyone has problems. Human, animal. May everybody be free from these problems. We don't need to have a plan. We don't need to have the power to fix it. We can just have the wish. That's the most important thing, just the wish. And then we can think, even through this short time we've had here, our minds have changed. We've acted in ways we may not have otherwise acted. The direction of our life has changed, even in a tiny way. So we can ask ourselves, what if the changes we made here continue to unfold? What kinds of beneficial results could arise for ourselves or others? And just focus on this for a bit. And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation.